I need to be a live stream.
Yep. Let's just see if we get this over here like this. Did you see the whole word?
These
You will record.
lines have some of the things.
Click on that. View channel to live. Oh, and
Those are over.
now you slide over here.
You say?
Video on YouTube.
Yeah.
It started me.
Live.
There. Which one's wherever you want to go.
How are we doing?
We're almost, if this one doesn't work and you're done what? This is the. I mean, you're done with trying this. Just test it to see if you get an audio. We just want to test.
I can hear it. I can hear it. I can hear
Okay,
it.
this is, all right, so here's what we're doing, we're using that camera right there,
All right,
so it's not gonna be able to zoom in, right, off the laptop. That's the best we can do for the moment, okay, till we fix this, right?
There will be audio in case somebody.
There is audio, it's all the regular audio is recorded, just the video is gonna just be distance from the laptop, right, you guys?
Okay, but that sound.
He's gotta shut that off,
Oh.
he's just asking that he can pick up the audio.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Okay, so, we have a quorum and I am going to call the meeting to order. First, I'm going to review the agenda. We have, in the business section, we need to approve the minutes from June 2nd, 2026. Correspondence, we have one letter from residents Diane and Carl Shorville dated July 2nd, 2026 in regard to the Cavaluzzi application. And I believe everybody here has gotten a copy of that and the application of the copy. We also have an email from resident Dawn Orlick dated June 30th, 2026 in regards to the Perez application. And I'm not gonna read these aloud, but they are in the file and the appropriate parties have been given copies. Okay, we have one public hearing, Cavaluzzi area variance for an accessory structure at 202 Bloomer Road, the Grangerville. Application for the construction of a 24 by 24 foot accessory structure or garage to be located in the side yard area in the RA3 zone, a variance of 20.6 feet. It's requested to place the structure closer to the side property line. There's a 25-foot setback requirement under section 210-17A2. And we have no new business and none other old business. And I have one matter to add at the end with regard to the surveys, that issue. We'd like to talk about that at the end. Okay. So, I first want to introduce Tom Harvey, who is the town's engineer, and I think I mentioned to you when I took the site visit that we felt like his services would be very useful to us. Okay, so I'm gonna start by asking you to address some the particular concerns of the letter from your next door neighbors. And I think that Tom Harvey also has questions with regard to the issue about runoff, and are there other things as well?
Yes, got a couple of questions.
Okay, so. Oh, forgot to, I'm sorry. Forgot to make a motion to approve the minutes of June 2nd, 2026 meeting.
I'll second that.
A second, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thanks you for reminding me. Okay. Um. You know, maybe Tom, it's just easier for you to begin rather than starting with the letter, so.
Alright, so I took a quick look at this plan and the potential concerns from both the public letter comments and just general locations of the site and stuff. So my first question was, there was a statement in the application package about how the building couldn't be moved any further from the sideline, so when the time comes and you present this, I'd like to understand better if there's any flexibility on that, or if there's any way to move a little more, because I think any more daylight that can be established between the building and the side property line is gonna help potentially mitigate either runoff or visual impacts or things like that. Because it's really hard to do anything in 4 feet and change in terms of some kind of visual screening or any kind of runoff controls or things like that in that space. So I think it'd be good if you could speak to that and explain why, like, it couldn't be moved to where one of the shed is being removed, or something like that. I couldn't buy, up to maybe 50% of the required setback or something. And then the other question I had was just looking at the garage plans, what's on the second floor? It appears to be a second floor in the garage.
It's just storage. It's just the storage for that.
So there's not gonna be any bedrooms or anything out
Oh,
there.
no, that's,
And it needs the 2 stories, because I think that's another thing that sort of adds to the mass of the building being that close to the problem. So I thought that was just something that could be discussed. I think that's another something to consider, that when it is that close to the property line, how follow that for large things. And then beyond that, I think there was also discussions in the application package about potentially picking up the roof runoff and putting it like either in a dry well or something else.
Yeah.
And I think we'd like to see something on the plan about that, because I think it's a good idea to make sure that the garage placement doesn't increase any runoff problems that may exist there. And it deals with its own roof runoff in a suitable way, both for this site and the neighborhood sites. And then the last thing I just wanted to understand a little bit more about is if there's gonna be any grading on that, because the Dutchess County parcel access site showed some contours that sort of drop off toward the neighbor. And I don't know if there needs to be fill put in there to make a level pad, or what that ends up looking like on the side of the garage to the neighbor. So I think that's the gist of my questions or comments, and I think some of those things could probably be spoken.
as far as where the building's gonna be, it's pretty flat with just gentle little grade towards the back. It's very, very,
So off the end of the driveway is a nice gradual slope to the back, so
very,
you could almost just pour the slab at the end of the driveway.
yes,
And on the side, it's not dropping off toward the side,
no,
okay. Because the contours from parcel access looks a bit different.
Yeah, and so, what happened, Tom, is when Jane and I went out, it became more clear what is being discussed. Is that, as you get over the property line, then it drops off more steeply into the swale.
Yep.
But it's relatively flat in the area
Yes.
where the garage is being proposed.
Yeah, and I think not unusual, I think the property lines as shown on parcel access are off probably almost 50 feet. Or a good amount, let's put it that way.
And the swale is not very obvious.
It's not defined anyway on parcel
Right,
access.
and so when you see it, you can see how is being used to direct water away from the front yard of the neighbor, and around it. And I think one of the things that I was wondering is, a dry well was something that you mentioned. I suppose another option is to increase the size of the swale if your neighbor was interested in doing that. And increasing the size of the swale so that it could handle, I'm gonna call them flash floods. Things where you get torrential downpour, there's a lot of surface runoff. And now you're gonna have water coming off the roof plus the ground. And so I doubt that the swale can handle extreme conditions.
Understood. My concern with that is that I don't know how the swale gets into the road drainage system. And, or if the road drainage system, if we start improving the swale, putting more water in the road drainage system, can it handle that? Are we gonna cause a problem for more people like on the road? So that's why my bigger suggestion was for the garage is to deal with its road runoff
Right,
separately. So that it can pretty much be taken out of the equation so that the garage doesn't increase any runoff issues. It deals with itself and mitigates itself.
and now I only raise the swale because one of the things we need to be able to do is to indicate we considered all the options.
Yes.
And one is to change the swale. Now, you're correct. I don't know the capacity of the catch basin. And that where it is at the end of the swale. And if the swale is an option rather than a dry well, somebody's gonna have to look at that.
Right, and the other thing on that is if the, for any kind of dry well or any infiltration practice you try to design. There'll be a storm that's bigger, like you said, flash floods, so it's never reasonable to design it for every possible storm that could come. You pick a rain event and you design it for that, and then you build in an overflow, so there'll be an overflow of any kind of system we could imagine.
There are 100-year floods, 500-year floods. If it's a dry well, then somebody would need to address.
What happens when it's full and it overflows, where does that go?
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So those are things I think we need to see more detail on, and it's not, I don't think the town wants to design anything for somebody, but I think we need to see the detail documented on how that kind of stuff is gonna be addressed.
And to swale is a delayed reaction from the mountains, why that water comes through there. It's not an immediate, like unless it's a 40-day, 40-night kind of storm, that the two of them probably won't be reacting at the same time. You know,
And that may be the norm, and I think what we're trying to do is be cognizant of the fact that there may be events that are not the norm, and you can't design for everything. And we may not be designing for a 500-year flood or a 500-year rain, but I think we'd like to have some sense of what the capacity is designed for and how you got to that. I mean, that would be really helpful. And I'm not an engineer, so I don't know how you do that.
Well, there's some things in code and general books that we go by, like the stormwater design manual and DEC. It doesn't rise to needing a full stormwater pollution prevention plan like DEC wants, but that's really the only book that we have that's the guide for how to design it.
Right.
So whether we need a full SWIP or not, usually that's the manual that I refer people to. That talks about how to design stuff, and then within the town code, I believe there's some typical standards for what kind of storm events that typical drainage has to happen, like roads or buildings. But I don't remember off the top of my head what year storm it is, but it's probably like a 25-year storm, that they want roads and stuff designed for it. And then as you get to 50 and 100-year storms, most things can't handle that, and most things aren't expected. But we can find that stuff in the code, and give guidance or direction on that if that's fine.
I'm gonna invite you to address.
Can I just add one thing before you do that? There are a variety of reasons why there are setbacks in the code. And the two that are most relevant for this particular application is drainage protection. And I'm thinking drainage protection for your neighbor, and the other is privacy. Those are the two big minimum reasons for having minimum setbacks in the town. And so if you're going through what you're saying, recognize that as a board, we are going to be focusing on drainage protection and privacy because we're forced to do that in order to be able to make a determination as to whether or not to issue a variance, and if to issue a variance, the size of the variance. So the larger the variance, the more important some of these factors become, which is why when Tom said, oh, if you can talk about moving it a little further, that reduces the size of the variance and helps us.
It gives more options for dealing with runoff and potential screening provision.
Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but
No, so I would invite you to, answer the other concerns that Tom raised about. Is there any flexibility of moving it in any direction farther from to increase the size of the setback or decrease the amount of variance that you need, talk about. Why is the building so big? Could it be smaller? And I'll just ask a question of you, the fact that it's 2 stories. How does that affect the drainage issues? Is it
I don't think that affects drainage, because I don't think it's bigger footprint necessarily.
Okay.
And I also think like a 24 by 24 is a really typical two-car garage size. I don't think that's extreme for that. I think the 2-story, I guess that adds mass for the visual, but I don't think it's any extra runoff. And my bigger concern was that there were no bedrooms on it. That was my bigger concern.
And there's no water, there's no electricity going into this.
I'm assuming it will have electricity.
Oh, yeah, there's
But no water or septic.
No, it's obviously, of course, right.
Definitely.
So is there any value to moving closer, if we're moving away from the property line a little bit? Right, and I see it's sort of seated where the entire garage is flush against the driveway, right? And I get the value of that. Is the plan that it's gonna be a 2-car garage? And it's gonna be 2 cars driving it, right? I'm just wondering about the idea of sort of, something that's in the neighbor's letter. About if it moves slightly away, sort of halfway across the driveway. Which puts half of it on the driveway, half of it on the grass, right? Which maybe means extending the blacktop, but also perhaps creating a breezeway that connects it to your house where you can go from the garage to the house without having to go outside,
Well, wouldn't that be great?
right?
But the problem is there's a septic tank there that we have to fill. The septic tank, so the way he can.
No, I get that, but I'm thinking, I see where the septic tank is drawn, and I know this is not the scale. I guess what I'm saying is, if you combine that with what Tom is saying. You know, where it becomes a self-contained entity, right, where the runoff of the garage is sort of contained to a dry well, it sort of runs in the back of the property or what have you. Right, so it's not additional water from the swale. And it's slightly off the property line, not a tremendous amount, but maybe we're talking about 25, maybe it's 12, right? 12, offset 12. And that creates more space for screening, which obviates the visual concern that Dennis was talking about, and handles the water concern.
If we look at the neighbor's house, there's no windows on the side of the house. We have pictures of it, so where this.
Right, so it's not like they're looking out windows and see.
And there's trees over there, and there's bushes and everything else, so.
Right.
Him coming up with this,
Well,
I mean,
That is
Oh,
certainly an important factor, right? However, having a building 4 feet from your property line, could reasonably impact the viewscape.
there's no windows.
And there's a huge tree,
No, but
The viewscape of the neighbor who, you know, we're having a chat, I'm not deciding.
Okay,
I'm just, because this is a hearing, we need to be able to demonstrate that we
Yeah.
discuss things that are being addressed in the letter from the neighbor, and I'm saying. While the neighbor may not be able to see the proposed garage from a bedroom or a room in his house. Well, the fact is, the neighbor has the right to use the entirety of their property.
Right.
And at some point, it may seem as though a 24 by 24 garage with a second story is encroaching very closely. And again, I started out by saying, you know, why are there minimum setbacks in the town? And one of them is privacy. And so I think it's clear that the neighbor is concerned, we're sensitive to the neighbor's concern. And you know, while there is a septic tank and a system drawn here, as Mike pointed out, there appears to be room to move this. Now, in the last meeting, I said to you, you could tell us if that got moved, you're gonna have to put more impervious surface down if you wanna do more blacktop. Okay, and that may be a trade-off that we have to consider, but what Mike was asking is, can that garage be moved further away from the, sorry, Luana, further away from the property line, perhaps over where the existing shed is, since that's coming off.
Mhm.
And that would still give you enough room between the accessory structure and the building, because you can't get too much closer to the main building. But it looks like there's room.
And if you didn't go any closer than where the shed was, in theory, you shouldn't be encroaching any worse than the shed is onto your set.
Do you mean the first shed or the second shed?
Um,
Do you mean
These
shed?
This
one
shed
or
here.
two?
This shed here.
The little one closest.
Shed on the
And
side.
so, you know, what Mike was asking is, can this be moved off the property line so that it looks something like this? Rather than right up on here. Right, and that helps with the privacy issue. It addresses Tom's point that it would make it easier to establish a visual barrier by planting trees. And so
And
it was not in your application, so we're asking you now about the
Are you talking
feasibility
about
of
what
it.
feature, or are you saying something that,
What's that?
what feature on these little?
Well, what I'm right here is,
Not
what I'm
exactly.
saying is, Mike was asking the question, if this entire structure could be moved to here,
It already-
okay.
Right. So if it simply shifted back this way to where half of the building was off the blacktop, which basically would be in the space where the shed is. So it comes further away from the property line, creates an opportunity for visual screening here. And potentially potentially you can connect a breezeway to the house, be able to travel from the house to run the over outside. I agree, you would be 12, presumably if this is half, 12 feet would be on the dirt. But you could fix that with blacktop if you chose to, you could gravel it wherever you see fit. But it wouldn't really be, essentially, it would just be occupying the space that this shed is occupying. Would be shifting, say 12 feet this way. But would reduce the amount of the variance as well.
It's like the steps, and very confused.
Something's over here.
Steps, the steps come down here from the deck, and then there's a platform here from the deck.
Right.
It's at least 5 feet.
Well, all right, let me understand what your concern is. Draw for me why, where the platform is and why,
I'm,
if this is the accurate drawing, okay, that's 24 by 24, and if I took the extreme, I went a little further than Mike, and I said, okay, take a shape of this size, move it where the shed is. Draw for me what is going to prevent you from putting it here rather than here in terms of stairs, pads, draw for me, because I don't
Right,
remember it when I was out there. But I mean, Mike said halfway, and I'm saying, okay, if this is accurate, 24 by 24, and I draw the same space here, now you've left a lot more space here.
And it's not much closer to the stairs that are being shown there than the existing shed.
I mean, there are stairs here, I see those. So I'm trying to understand, when you say it's going to encroach on something, what is it encroaching on?
I'm not an architect, I don't know, well, it just looks really close to where the deck is coming down.
This is showing 25 feet between the garage right now and the house. I can't tell from the deck, but 25 feet. This is less than 4.5 feet next to the neighbors. So you've got, 5 times more space between your house and the garage than your neighbor has. His property, their property line and the garage, where they have under the code, and I wouldn't call it a right, but the expectation that there is gonna be 25 feet there.
How do we get into the garage? We turn around and go this way.
Well, okay, yeah, what might have to happen, and we talked about this briefly the last time, is if you want to be able to drive into the garage in this direction, this way, you would need to either have gravel or something if you don't want to be driving on dirt, or you'd have to put asphalt there. Now, one of the trade-offs of doing that is you're increasing the amount of impervious surface. Okay, I'm just acknowledging that's something that we would need to consider, but as part of the fact that we need to demonstrate that we have considered alternatives, reasonable alternatives to what's been proposed, we would need to see whether or not increasing the amount of asphalt here would offset having it located where it is now. And I don't know the answer, I'm just saying that's what we have to do.
And well, there's also decreased impervious with the 3 sheds there. So
Okay,
there's
The
another offset there.
other point of that is that if you're moving it this way, it can also move this way, right? So in terms of your question about, well, how do I get into the other part of the garage? If the garage is set further back,
halfway here, so we can still get in this way.
well, that's what I'm proposing, yeah, that was exactly what I said, was this is a box of 24 by 24. If that box shifted to here. Right, you're creating 12 feet of distance here. Right,
but you'd only be able to get one car in if you did that, right?
unless you shifted it slightly back, right?
Okay.
In a straight line, you'd have to be,
You twist it a little bit, you twist it a little bit, is that what you're saying?
You know, but
I'm simply trying to address the neighbor's concerns, right?
Mhm.
We're being asked to make a variance, exception. And I think it's important to remember that, it's not proprietary, right? It won't be approved simply because you want it that way. The neighbors have expressed a concern, we have to address that, and there is a setback provision that has to be dealt with. And anything that reduces the amount of the variance of the setback is in your favor.
And required to be looked at.
Yeah,
by
absolutely.
as well.
That's
Because we're supposed to ask ourselves that question.
Yeah.
Can it be reduced at?
right. We're we're putting proposals to get out for you to review and to go back with things.
You're drawing pictures on a piece of paper, I can't.
Alright, now let me just tell you, and I don't mean to be rude, I know that this is very important to you and you're trying to understand where we're coming from. You have the burden, not us, to figure out. Are there alternatives? Can you reduce it? What's the least amount that you can get, the benefit that you want?
Mhm.
And those are your burdens to demonstrate to us, it's not our burden to figure it all out for you. And, I think that it's. I mean, there are more questions, and if you have questions of us, we can answer those questions, but my sense is. There needs to be more done in this application, it's not gonna be approved in the way. It is presented to us because you haven't demonstrated to us that you can't move it. You haven't demonstrated to us that this is the least amount of
Right.
a variance that you could be requesting, I mean,
Right, and what we're asking you to do is to be open and flexible to considering alternative ideas. Right, we understand that this is the idea you came in with. What we're telling you is this doesn't work.
but
But if it doesn't work, then, it's not binary. Right, if it were binary, doesn't work, great, we're done, not approved.
And if
We
I
want you to get approved, we want you to be able to do this,
and if I
but we
can
need to be able to
elaborate on what
strike
Mike
a
is saying,
balance.
is that the application. The instructions require that you identify alternatives. And I guess what we're illustrating is there are alternatives that were not proposed that we would like to have considered. And what Jane is saying is, it's your responsibility to draw those up and not say, oh, I can't work with this, we're just doing a rough and dirty. All right, but here's one of my major concerns. If we don't scrupulously evaluate your proposal. And your neighbor decides that we've done less than a thorough job, he can contest our decision. And you won't get your variance. And so what we're trying to be very careful of is we recognize that there's a neighbor who's not particularly happy with some aspects of the job. To the extent that you can identify alternatives that we can say, you've addressed concerns expressed by the neighbor. There's a greater chance that if he does want to take this to court, that our decision will be defensible. And so we're not making this stuff up. Our job as a board is to evaluate what the effects are. And sometimes there are no ideal solutions. And so we're asking you to come up with some
We
things.
have to say, we move this here and we twist it, we have to do another meeting.
Oh, yes, oh, absolutely. Because what
If the idea is that we're gonna get done tonight. Put that out. Because we're gonna need to see what the plans are to obviate the concerns of the.
You know,
Right, and to resolve the issues that we've raised, which is that we want that the.
You want.
As proposed, no, we can say we want the options explored. Because that's our job. Right, as presented somewhere.
And I would recommend some kind of runoff mitigation and visual mitigation. What that means isn't something we necessarily tell anybody. A lot of times that means hiring somebody or finding somebody that's a designer that can help you do that, draw that stuff up, because it's not something people do every day unless you've done it before.
And as an example, we had an applicant build a garage closer to the property line than what they were allowed to do. They asked for a variance. They came to us and said, we'd like a variance. What did the neighbor say? The neighbor said, we're concerned about it being closer to our property, and ultimately the applicant agreed to plant trees as a visual barrier. And I mean, we've had that happen before. It's not unusual. But when you're asking for an exception to the code, we need to be able to explain why we're giving you an exception and what you've done to mitigate concerns and reasons why there are setbacks. And I said setbacks, the two important ones are privacy and drainage protection. And whether you need a dry well for drainage protection or whether you need trees for a privacy issue, those are things that, as Jane would say, your responsibility to address it to us. And I think what we're trying to do is to help you understand how we do this process. Okay, and we're not trying to make it hard. We're trying to find a way to allow you to do this so that it's justifiable.
So even if we move this over, we still need a privacy fence, is that what you're saying?
No,
No, I don't think he's saying that at all. He's saying privacy is an issue, and it may be that we're gonna say, plant something there. Maybe it'll say, well, the trees are already there and that's fine.
Maybe you have a preference to a fence over trees, and maybe you wanna plant that seed or.
And it also may be that by moving it, the neighbor says that it's not an issue, it's not a visual issue.
Thank you.
We don't
mean,
know.
the neighbor
Right?
might say,
We don't know.
if it's not 4 feet my property line, it's 20 feet from my property line, I'm not quite as upset.
Right.
But we don't know that. And so these, technically, we should have rejected your application for not having alternatives. And we sort of cut you some slack and said, all right, I think you got an understanding of where we're going. We'll do a hearing. And so at a hearing, we then get into the details. We're now into the thick of the proposal. And you know, we would like to find a way to help you. But you gotta help us help you.
Right, we understand that what's proposed is sort of ideal from your perspective. But it's not working for everyone. So we need to find a compromise. That's where we're at.
I'm really throwing a lot of things at you, and I'm just, you made it very clear to me when we visited that the plans for the garage are not. They were there as an example of something for that size.
Yes.
I would ask you, you know, the neighbor makes the point of that it appears that it's approximately 21 feet high. It doesn't exactly tell us in these plans how high. And the neighbor suggests to minimize the visual impact, maybe it could be a lower building, not quite 21, something smaller than that. Have you considered something small? I know you had things in mind about what you want to put in that storage. I don't know, but it seems like it's a pretty high building. Maybe you could make it.
If we take down, we're taking down 3 sheds, we have 3 cars, 2 motorcycles, a snow blower. We have the generator, we have all the stuff that we have to put in there, that's why we did it. I didn't wanna crawl around on my hands and knees on something that's like this. So I only did it that way so I can get stuff in and out. I'm 62 years old, I don't wanna go on my hands and knees to grab my Christmas stuff.
And we're not debating
I'm just-
why you designed it.
I
What Jane is saying is that it's a very tall structure. And we're trying to find a way of being able to justify issuing a variance if we want to do that for a very tall building, which was brought up by your neighbor. And
I don't think it's just that it's a tall structure, because 21 feet isn't terribly tall.
Mhm.
And a 24 by 24 is not a large size for a garage, but you're also looking at the difference from where your house is and where their house is, and that's 5 to 10 feet difference as well. In other words, it because your properties aren't on the same level fields, they're starting off down here, you're starting here, this building's gonna see even higher. Is that
Right, if it's a 20-foot high building, if it is, and it's 5 feet higher in grade, then it's a 26-foot high building.
It's not gonna be installed in the house, it's not gonna fit.
In your existing option.
Yeah.
But it's a lot closer to the problem.
Okay, but what we're trying to address is a paragraph in Carl and Diane's letter, which says, lastly, it's here the proposed garage would be approximately 25 feet tall at feet. In order to make 21 feet tall at feet. In order to minimize the visual impact, I would request that consideration be given to keeping a lower profile since it is so close to our house and property. Even if moved as suggested. Further, it would be appropriate to install some sort of suitable landscape screening between the garage and our property to further minimize the visual impact. Okay, now. I guess what we're asking you to do is to come up with something that says, we've addressed this concern expressed by the neighbor. And we're not gonna reduce the size of the garage because you wanna have room to walk in. However, what you're gonna do is you're gonna move it further from the property line so that it's not 21 feet, approximately 24 feet, 4 feet off your neighbor's property. This is what we're trying to do, and we didn't make this up, but we do need to address it very specifically. And if your neighbor happens to come in at the next meeting, he could ask it, but we're saying, rather than wait for another hearing and then have to respond, why don't you do it? Right,
I would just say one other thing, and that is that I believe you could maintain this other shed. And keep this one. If you moved if you got rid of this one, and you had this, I think what's the rule, they can have 3
buildings. But. What we understand, you got a lot of equipment. I've got a garage full of generators and snowmobiles, snow blowing equipment. I got all sorts of things. I understand how cluttered things can get when you accumulate equipment. I got that. I'm not debating it. I'm not asking you to reduce the size of the garage. What I'm asking you to do is to address concerns expressed by your neighbor that address the issues for why there are minimum setbacks. Privacy being one, and drainage protection being the other. Now, Tom, does it matter which way the roof pitches from your perspective as an engineer?
It depends, if they pick it up with gutters and take roof leaders down somewhere else, it doesn't matter which way it pitches, because you're catching it with gutters and put it where you want it.
Okay.
If you don't have gutters, it won't matter.
And so what you're hearing is, I'm not an engineer, but an engineer is saying, you need to come up with something that says how you're going to handle the runoff.
If you wanna say that we're gonna put gutters and have them
We want you to draw it, we want you to show it on a plan, so it's official and clear where it's going and when it's going. And if you can't, you might need to hire a landscape architect, engineers, somebody to do that, because it really needs to be clear on the plans, because that becomes the official legal document that the board will approve.
What is the question? Why is there?
Because that is not the final plan. What
Got it.
what
So
you
it's just-
asked for was something to show how high it was. And I had that done prior to it, before it, so I didn't pay for that. I didn't want to have the expense of drawing the plans if I didn't know the variance was going to be approved. So I showed that as an example of what we wanted, a 2-car garage with the thing, the balcony doesn't have to be there. The windows aren't gonna be specifically where they are. That is a rough idea of what the pitch was gonna be and what everything was gonna be.
Okay, do you have the total square footage on the second floor?
It-
It hasn't, it isn't at the design stage, you know.
Yeah.
I mean,
Okay,
it's gonna be,
alright,
besides the staircase, it's gonna be close to this thing with 24 by 24.
Because you're gonna have a slope roof on one side, the door higher roof on the other
Yeah,
side,
I mean,
so you're gonna have the same floor.
the floor is the ceiling, but you know,
But you're not gonna have a full ceiling height all the way across.
yeah.
So, you know, we've discussed two ways, possibly of handling runoff relative to the neighbor. One is to increase the size of the swale because it's rather small, or as Tom said, possibly a dry well, which you mentioned to me when we were out there. You have to show the dry well, where it's gonna be, what the capacity is gonna be, how you're gonna get the drainage to go to the dry well. Those are critical factors. And I understand that you're trying to get a sense of how much money do you want to sink into this, unless you think you're gonna get a variance. And we can't promise you that you're gonna variance. What we're saying to you is, you got a better chance of having a variance issue if you address some of the concerns that have been expressed here. And so, yeah, you're gonna have to incur a little bit more expense.
I just wanna mention something about the dry well, I mean, the design of a dry well, you're gonna wanna know something about the soils, how well the soils can accept. Infiltration from a dry well, if you've got shallow rock, if you've got shallow groundwater, it's not gonna work well for you. And then you also wanna make sure you meet the separations from the dry well, the stormwater dry well, to your septic system. You don't wanna saturate the area around your own septic system.
And this is gonna sound really picky, and I realize this is revised, but there are a bunch of bits missing in your application. And I'd like to see those filled in as well. For example, the tax parcel number wasn't there. The total acreage, this whole part, actually, a lot of your short environmental form is either missing, or I would like you to. I would like to see some of the things reconsidered, like, you know, 18 and 19. And 17. If you don't mind looking over those. Giving your thoughts on that.
Meaning it was incomplete, or you don't think the answer was right?
I don't think the answer to
18, 19.
17, 18, and 19, and square footage. Added on for the drawings. It's somewhere, I think, because they're not your drawings.
On that note, I would, if you're not doing the balcony or something, you could just cross it off on the plan, just to make it clear you're not doing it, because again. The records matter, what's on the paper is what they gotta consider, and if you make it clear, there's a balcony shown, but not doing it. Then we don't know, then that's clear as part of the record that you're not doing it, we don't have to worry about it or talk about it.
And just for a visual, I found.
Why did you say the routine?
Is there an other? Is that my phone say something? And that's really private property, and I don't know where their subject is.
You know, solid waste management facilities like a dump or a landfill.
Oh, never mind then, sorry, there's that one.
But 17, which is what I want to mention first, is will the proposed action create stormwater discharge either from point source or non-point sources? If yes, will stormwater discharge flow to adjacent properties? And Alana said she doesn't think you answered that correctly, and it sounds like it needs to be a yes. And then will stormwater discharges be directed to established conveyance systems, runoff or storm drains?
Depends which way they go.
Depends on which way you go, and so what Alana's saying, without some of the details. The answers to 17 may not be accurate, that's what Alana said.
I was saying 17, 18, and 19, I'm not sure which one you said.
Alright, so she doesn't forget that 19, that's not an issue.
Sorry. We want 17, 18, and the square footage drawing.
And just see that it's complete, I mean, if there's,
There shouldn't be anything blank there unless it says skip to the next one if you said no or yes. So any boxes that have no answer on them, we should just make sure that's correct. Otherwise, it's not.
and if you are going to be removing the building, you can also just draw in what's gonna happen with the driveway too. Pardon? In other words, if you resubmit this to us and the building is now over here, if you're going to be extending the driveway, can you show us how it's going to be done? If you're putting the house over here, you wanna just show the driveway down. Thank you.
Getting the variance is not a trivial matter. I mean, it's not. And so we're not trying to make this more difficult than what it needs to be. However, it needs to be thorough. And we're trying to give you a sense of what thorough is. And if you follow the option of using a dry well, then you need to, as Tom said, tell us about the dry well. Where's it going to be located? What's the size? How are you going to get water from the roof to the dry well? It's not here. And in addition to the fact that, you know, as an engineer, Tom is asking for that, your neighbor has expressed a concern about stormwater discharge.
Oh, can I add to that? When we were in the car last night, my husband's lived there. And one of the things that he noticed is that the swale doesn't seem to have been maintained. So if they put the swale in, I forget what they said, in 1990 something. You know, swales need to be maintained, or they're just by itself, they're not. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but they're not going to help carry the water away that they should be as well. And I don't know if that's something that you want to work out with your neighbor about how to continue to maintain this.
Well, and I guess
Maybe out of our jurisdiction, but just.
you're making a point that isn't even shown on the plan, like I'm still wondering where this plan is.
Right.
Having not been there, so I guess that's a no. Like I don't
He's
know,
talking about it.
I want to be careful with you with maintaining.
He's
I'm
talking
talking
about
about
different
this swale.
swale versus this swale,
I'm talking about this swale,
that's on his property.
yeah.
Right, so you can't really maintain that unless you get permission.
We've
from your
been
neighbor.
maintaining part of his property
Before
now.
it goes downhill,
Before
they've
it
been
goes
all.
down the hill, we've been maintaining that part of it. So if the swale is completely on his property, am I supposed to maintain it?
No, not unless you have an easement or something written that says you're supposed to.
No,
That's why it was my.
however,
Yeah.
an alternative, one way of potentially mitigating the flow of water from your property to the front yard of your neighbors would be to say to your neighbor, look, we'd like to increase the size of the swale. Would you be willing to allow somebody to come in and clear that swale out and make it larger?
And get that in writing if you do it, that's my recommendation.
But what, you know, what Tom also said is, okay, that might work. But now the question is, if you increase the size of the swale that runs along here,
You're encroaching.
what? You would be asking your neighbor whether he would be willing to have somebody come in and increase the size of the swale, and he might say, no. I don't want to do that, in which case you're back to Tom's suggestion of the driveway. All I'm
But
saying.
my bigger concern on that is still then the water ends up at the road, and do we create a problem there? We don't want to create a problem at the road.
Well, and not, and I'm gonna point out one more thing, if you increase the size of the swale here, let's say you go in and you just, right now it's about that wide, and if you made it wider and a little deeper. you know, now do you have to maintain and do something with the swale that goes all the way from the corner here down to the catch basin? That's a lot longer than the swale that's over here.
Yeah.
I'm just explaining why you might say, I'm not sure we want to monkey with the swale. I'm doing your thinking for you, but I'm saying,
It'd be a lot easier.
yeah, a dry well might be a lot easier. Okay.
But we already said that we would want to do the driveway.
Okay.
And we would just need to see how it's designed, see the detail for it, see that you've got infiltration and you need some separation, you're not trying to infiltrate into rock.
I mean,
Another hit to that, if you don't have good depth, is infiltrators, which is shallow.
it's not for nothing. All this little swale that's here,
Mhm.
this is all coming down from a mountain, and this other guy's pond over here.
Right. But I imagine he's got the pond to try to catch some of the water.
But it,
It's
I'm
not- I
gonna
mean,
apologize,
it's-
because I'm not, I don't mean to disrespect anybody, but that has been there for 30 years. He has been dealing with that swale before we bought it, it came the runoff from the mountain. This isn't something, how I feel, this isn't something I'm creating. I might be creating what's coming off of the garage, and if I'm catching it and dissipating it, how is it that? And I don't mean this, I just don't know how other way to say, how is it I'm being penalized for the swale that's been in the property and he's been dealing with this all this time?
And you're
He hasn't had a problem with the swale or anything else with the runoff, and if we catch it from the garage. Why does that have something to do with, I'm not messing with his swale,
you
right? I'm not doing anything different.
Right, you
If
won't
I'm
have to-
catching it from my garage and dealing with it.
Okay, but let me just say. There is nothing in any documents that we have in front of us and that your neighbors may have seen that talked about the dry well. So
Agreed.
that's why you need to have that in the plan.
And I-
That's valid.
Nobody's telling you to go one way or the other here, we're saying you're gonna have to address runoff somehow.
Right, and I understand that, but it just, to me, it sounded like you're saying, well, you know, you have to have this dredged, then you have to have this done.
You
If I'm saying,
have to.
you know, agreed, I apologize. I'm just saying, I'm not affecting the property as it is right now. If I don't build that garage, that would be there, and it's been there for 30 years. So if you're telling me, or if what I'm picturing is you need to build this garage, tell me how you're gonna get the runoff, and I say, well, I'd like to put the dry thing here, and this is how I'm gonna do it, and that's what I'm gonna do.
Right.
Should that not suffice my neighbor? Because
Yes.
I'm not imposing on him at all.
Yes, it
I'm
would.
just trying to figure out what you guys are asking me to do.
All right, well, we agree with what you just said. If
Okay.
you tell us that you're going to construct a driveway, you're going to redirect the
No,
runoff.
show us on the plan,
Yeah,
the design
but
for it.
you're telling
you tell
us
us?
to
I wanna
do
be
that,
clear.
and you're gonna redirect it, then, as Tom said, you have to show us on the drawing. Where the dry well is going to be, how large it is, and Tom normally doesn't come to our meetings. He's an engineer, we asked him because none of us have engineering experience. So what you heard from him was some valuable feedback about if you're going to propose a dry well. Capacity, and something about the. How, what kind of soil you got, you know, I mean, if you're on bedrock. 5 feet down, that may be very different than if you've got clay, or if you've got sand, we don't know what you got.
You were mentioning books earlier. How would I be able to find the volume coming off of that?
I think go to the DEC website, the stormwater design manual, but that's a complicated book, like that's one of the most complicated stormwater design manuals that there is. There, you could just Google some best practices for dealing with that, but there's basically the amount of rain that falls on the roof times the roof area generates amount of runoff. Then that water can go into the dry well to calculate the square footage and what your infiltration rate is into the ground. So it's a relatively simple calculation, but between the internet Googling, general calcs. Stormwater design manual for New York State, the information's there and available, and there's probably some examples of.
And John Hughes, who is one of our members who is not here. Will probably ask you about the size of the gutters that you can use there, it can be 4-inch gutters, 6-inch gutters. Because the size of the gutter will tell you whether you can handle heavy rain. And so when you tell us you're gonna put in a garage and you're gonna put gutters on, I'm telling you, John's gonna ask, what size gutters are you putting up there?
And the building code actually has a great table based on your roof area, how big a gutter. So you might be able to find.
Okay.
I have one other suggestion. I just happened recently to be looking at the Department of Public Works in Dutchess County, and they have a ton of people involved with stormwater issues. And, you know, you maybe make a call over.
I don't know if they're gonna help you in Dutchess County, because they really usually work on, like county roads and things like that. Where you might get some help is from soil and water on Route 4 and 4, not just county soil.
The Cornell.
Yes, that they might be able to help you with something.
And I wanna emphasize again, we're not trying to establish hurdles to make you jump over and hoops to go through. That's not what we're trying to do. What we're trying to do is to have you accurately describe how you're going to address some of the issues that we raised and some of the issues raised by your neighbor. And I realize it's not as easy, as simple as you might have thought it was. But we're trying to explain to you what's involved in this process, and we're held accountable. And we have the ability to issue a variance, but what comes with that is a responsibility to demonstrate that we have considered all issues.
I'm gonna just also give you this. This is like a, the guideline to me of things that I need to be saying. But it has here, it tells you exactly, because these are the words that I'm gonna need to recite. It's gonna tell you what we need to consider. And then we make facts and findings about it. And just look at these things and just be honest about it. You know, so you can, you don't have to read them here, but just, there's 5 factors. They're all spelled out there. And when you're thinking about these things, think about those factors. Because that's the exercise that we have to go through.
We've had some applicants come in and you can listen to us and you can hear us saying, we don't think this is gonna fly. There's no way you're gonna be able to do this. We haven't, I don't think we've done that with you. I think what we've tried to say is we need more information, and probably more than you thought was necessary when you began this process. But this is a learning experience for you. And we're trying to help you. We're not trying to obstruct it. We understand what you're looking for. But you gotta help us. Okay?
All right, so we will hold this over for the next meeting. What?
Did you open the public hearing?
Yes, I don't know if I said the magic words,
I
but
didn't hear you.
when I called you up, when I started. All right, I didn't say the magic words. I trust Spanish.
And later we have a public hearing this evening. Okay.
Just wanna make sure we did.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Well, I am not closing the public hearing. I'm continuing until the next meeting, which is on August, what is the date there?
August 4th.
Okay, 4th.
And I would add, if you have questions, get in touch with Cynthia and say, we're not exactly sure about where we need to go. Cynthia will either give you an answer or get to Jane and Jane will give Cynthia an answer, but there's no need for you to necessarily wait until the next meeting. If you need some clarification, ask. I mean, that'll make it easier at the next hearing. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Yes.
What do you have? You have.
It looks like on the same picture. Well, I think that-
They're not, they're a long, but there's 6 packs of them, so all you need is one.
Yeah, okay, thank
You
you.
want them back?
No,
Okay.
fine.
Thank you.
Okay. Not so good with the formal houses. Okay.
You have it?
Yes, thank you. I think it was helpful to be able to say that somebody who has expertise in this area. Is explaining what needs, rather than just a group of people who, are familiar with the. Process of getting a variance on zoning, I mean, that was very helpful.
And the stormwater is a tricky thing across the board, the sensitive thing.
Well, and, you know, for you to be able to say, you need to understand, something about the soil that you're putting this in is important.
Yeah, yeah.
I forget what people don't do this stuff, don't know, honestly,
Yeah.
I do it all the time.
Right,
You
right.
know, but, you know, if there's, let me ask you a question. If there is a lot of groundwater, you put a dry well. And it fills up because,
It can work backwards, it can be full all the time.
well, and so let me.
I mean, ideally, the water's not gonna go uphill, but once it fills up and it's full of water, it doesn't take any more.
Well, yeah,
Right.
I've asked, the hearing is over, probably we return the hearing today. Okay, so now, as a layperson. If they come back and they say, okay, we're gonna put in a dry well, it's 10 feet diameter, 6 feet tall. But we know that there's a lot of groundwater in that area. How do we know if it's going to be able to absorb the runoff from the garage? And that it won't be full all the time because of groundwater?
So what we do is test, we dig the hole, we do a deep test, we see the depth of groundwater rock. And it's the same way when we design a septic system. What is the depth of groundwater rock? We dig down, confirm it and measure it, and then we've got to meet a certain separation to it, so there's soil. You don't want to be just on top of the rock, but you still not gonna infiltrate very well.
Okay,
You gotta be a few feet above it, no matter what you're doing, septic needs more separations and storm.
I accept that. Now I'm thinking to myself, that's not an inexpensive.
And it's not an easy thing for somebody that's not a professional to do.
Well, but
Like, there's gotta be a perk test, the method for doing a perk test, I'm gonna ask the question, if they design a dry well, what's your separation of rock and groundwater, how do you know?
okay, and I'm saying, I accept that, and that makes a lot of sense to me. This is not an inexpensive endeavor.
No, and there's no contour check, I mean, that's a concern of mine too, is what's. What if they are great? But really, then they can't do this without any grading, I don't think.
It's pretty flat.
But
Well,
you understand, the slab has to be perfectly flat, the garage slab has to be perfectly.
Right,
So even if it drops off 1 foot over the
Yeah.
length of the garage,
still gonna be gritty.
and you're that close to the property. What are you doing? You fill in more, push more water toward the neighborhood, but I don't know, but we don't see it.
So,
I'm thinking to myself, if I was an applicant. Reflecting on what was said this evening. They're being asked to undertake something that could be fairly expensive. I mean,
and they
It
don't
sound-
wanna do it until they know they have variance.
Rosa seemed to think, oh, okay,
Ways to do business, I'm sorry, I mean,
Yeah.
if you knew what we charge for a big project for somebody before the even submission goes in.
Well,
It's,
But I'm thinking from Rose's perspective, she's saying, okay, we're gonna put a dry well in, we won't mess with the swale. And I'm thinking, yeah, but when you select that option.
then it's gonna cost all kinds of more questions.
Yeah, that's true.
Like, if you guys ask me to look at it,
Yeah.
I guarantee you I'll have questions.
Okay,
There's some kind of-
I'm walking through this because I wanna be able to be thinking about this before the next hearing. And so, you know, if I was an applicant, I'm trying to figure out what's the path of least resistance and. Saying that you're not gonna mess with the swale. And you're gonna put things in a dry well, okay, that sounds pretty simple.
Well, it sounds like he wants to teach himself how to design a driveway, which I don't know, maybe he can. I wanna give him the benefit of the doubt.
Okay, well,
Do you think it would be efficient? For all of us, including yourself, to write the kind of letter that you suggested was a possibility and that identifies these are the kinds of things?
I
that
think
you should-
see what they come up with the next submission, if they got a lot of detail, but not enough. Then I think that's gonna make sense to help guide them, and that's what I mean by our letter, a lot of times our letter isn't trying to nitpick the things they didn't do. is trying to guide them into doing the things that'll cover all of our backsides.
And my sense is, what Tom is saying is much like what we say, it's not our responsibility to tell you how to do this. What we're telling you is, here are the things you need to consider. You've said, okay, you may need to do a percolation test, you may need to know.
But you didn't say that to them, you said that after.
I think I did say they'll need to know infiltration rates.
Yeah, and so,
Now, that may not have meant anything to them, I don't know, but it's the key to the design is knowing what your infiltration rate is.
but your responsibility isn't to give them a tutorial on how you do this.
Right,
What you said is, I'm gonna give you my professional opinion. And
and I also said they may need to hire somebody to help you, which I really think is where it's gotta go, and I don't remember how the code states that stuff. Who can present to the ZBA? Like, I know a lot of towns have a limit on, like, a non-professional person can't present as a site plan. And I know like some towns actually allow then surveyors to present site plans and change things around. I don't remember if Unionville has a, like, if you're doing a drainage plan or a grading plan, do you really have to be an engineer, or can we accept something from a layman?
Right.
I don't know if that's the right term, but that's what I'm wondering, is can we accept something they draw up? I figured I'd give them the benefit of the doubt and see what it looks like, and I like to try to do that, and if maybe the guy can do it, and we can guide him a little bit and get us over the finish line.
Yeah.
And that'd be a good thing.
Well, let me, suppose. We. Grant them a variance, they come in, they have some things that are different and. They really changed it around, they have this drywall
They
that
sell us on it, we like it, it's good.
looks good. When they get their building permit. Does this get addressed again?
No, because the plan that you approve and give them the variance on shows the driveway.
okay,
Shows all that stuff, and the building inspector looks at that, okay, what ZBA approval got, that looked like
No,
that,
but-
what's my building permit look like, what's the
But
same,
the
let's
building,
go.
but the variance is only saying the measurement, it's not really.
Right, but the plans that you approve, the plans that were presented to you last are referred to in your resolution, it should be.
Well, I don't know if we necessarily do that. I don't think that we're. Like certifying the plan,
No, but
we're just
But
saying.
yeah, you're accepting a plan based on what they presented to you, you're giving them a resolution of approval based on what they presented in the plans. What other documentation you have other than an application and EAF? You don't have a picture as to where they're putting stuff, or how they're grading it, where the pipes are gonna go, except for the plan.
so if we take a giant step back. One option is to swale, one option is to dry well, what's the third option? Move the garage so that it's not in, you don't require a variance, if you don't need a variance. Then we don't have to go through this.
Yeah, we don't even have to talk about that.
Right,
Then it is what it is.
Focused
And
on.
really, then that becomes Will's problem, he should look at that a little bit, he should let him build a garage that's gonna cause some one-off problems to the neighbor, but I don't know if he really looks at that. or-
Well,
Yeah.
from our perspective, as a zoning board. If they came back to us and said, we're not gonna put it within the setback.
We're gonna put it
withdraw our
25 and take it
application,
away. There you go.
then we don't ask these questions.
We don't get a chance to.
That's
That's roughly where it would be, if they put it here.
But we wouldn't have had to have these conversations.
Let me ask a question, Jane, do,
And it's not a big deal to adjust the concrete or the asphalt, cut it till it's flush to there, add a little sliver of it.
do we need to follow up and say, look. You've asked for a variance, and when you ask for a variance, you get to address all these questions.
Yeah.
If you choose to move that garage so that you don't need a variance, then the questions we're asking you disappear. So would you like to move it 25 feet away from the side property line? Or do you wanna go through this and ask for a variance?
But I think the other problem is, again, like, they don't understand how to read plans, which is something I always forget, because I do it all the time. A lot of people don't know how to read a plan or draw a plan, which you mentioned that. And then I don't really think they really know where their septic is.
No,
I
they
think
don't,
they ought to be careful.
they don't know that. And I also get the sense that they felt like it was just a matter of, well, we just gotta go in and sort of, be nice and it'll all get approved. And I think that.
You don't know how many septic tanks I found under a deck.
Yeah.
So it shouldn't be, but it is.
But it is,
They
right.
didn't want it over here because.
It was too close to those steps.
It was too close to stuff, but they literally just found last year.
One of the things I was looking at in the street view of this is, did it used to have a garage under?
It must. It must have, this whole section over here was like it's on much, because it's a racetrack.
I don't know, I wanna go with there.
What I'm asking is whether it would be worth reminding the builder and the applicant. If you were to locate this garage so that you didn't need a variance, what you heard during the hearing goes away. And I was kicking myself after I left for not saying that, is you were before us because you want an exception. If you don't need an exception,
You don't come before us.
don't come before.
Go right to the-
Well, and now the question is, you really didn't wanna move it. Maybe you wanna think carefully about moving it, so that you don't have to ask for a variance. And we could wait until the next hearing and say that to them, or do we have Cynthia say after the meeting, the board discussed this among themselves, and they wanted to remind you that if you don't have to come before the board and ask for a variance by moving the garage, a lot of what we're asking for.
I think it's obvious, I don't know, to me it feels obvious,
Well,
like.
They can watch
I
it
don't
on
know
the
if it is,
YouTube.
frankly,
They'll
and
hear
you
all
want
the
to
discussion.
they're already a can of worms email, right, which is like, hey, look, you can open the can of worms or
Close it back up.
move it, and there's no variance and, right, nobody's opening the can.
I hear you, but, you know, my sense is that things got a little passionate with the applicants and they're just. Sometimes you sort of have to step back.
Yeah, I don't think it was terribly passionate, I think she was a little frustrated because I think she thought that this was gonna be a contrary thing. And that like, this is what we
That
want,
has had count for 3 days, and that's totally stressful,
yes,
so.
absolutely.
Right, no, but
But this is what we
Yeah,
want, this is what we want, and we don't understand why this is such a big deal, just approve the exception, let's move on. And I get that, you don't have any experience with this kind of thing.
Right, and
I don't know if you guys often issue variances more than 50%. I know a lot of ZBA steer with.
we've done that, but.
But this one is extraordinarily large.
I think so, I saw that too, I felt like that, and I don't really see the reason it can't get a little bit. I don't see why it
No,
can't.
this was sort of like, this is what we want, and we think it, why would you just approve what we want?
And I think they were able to make at least 12-foot setback work, I think they seemed agreeable.
Right.
Is there any harm in having Cynthia reach out and say, the board wants to remind you that if you would move the garage so that you don't need a variance, you won't have to go down the rabbit hole. They're all, and maybe they just sort of lost track of that. We keep saying, well, it's obvious. Well, maybe it's not obvious.
I don't think they knew what that was gonna get charged, like what it's gonna cost, and again, if they have to hire a professional to help them through this process, which they might have to do to get rid of it. Then the cost of building more driveway to the new garage is minimal, probably.
Right, and so
Yeah,
rather
accurate.
than.
It'd be a money decision.
I'm thinking about this from the perspective of, you know, now they're gonna ask the builder, you know, do you want to dry wells, they're gonna have to spend money, and. Is there any harm in just reminding them that they came before us because they wanted an exception? If you don't need an exception,
I don't think there's a harm in that, I felt like it was obvious, but I could be
well,
tainted.
Right. Yeah, we sometimes
From trying
forget.
to avoid variances every chance I get.
Right.
All right, I think we've.
it's nice.
Yeah.
We
I agree.
spent a few minutes just about the survey issue, that has nothing to do with you, thank you so much.
Yes,
So I'm really happy that you were here.
And let me know if you want to review the next one, put a letter together, and we could do that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Maybe as we're looking at better practices, maybe there's stuff that we want them to, too. Eventually.
Just ask for this.
Because I think I get involved in a lot of things that aren't engineering issues. So sometimes there's things like, I don't know, an accessory apartment that I get asked to review, and I'm like, does the septic work? Do they have health department approval? That's the only comment I got. So I just like, I'm happy to help, but I don't wanna spend people's escrow.
Right. Right.
Right, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
It's,
Thanks. Have a good night.
and we also, I guess, need to address Perez.
I don't have anything to say about Perez, honestly, I mean.
I think I jotted it down.
It's not our,
I jotted down a quick note.
Not our circus anymore?
we require that the trees be planted and maintained. If they're not planted and maintained, then it's Will's job to do something. Okay, not my problem. You know, we specifically said we thought the greatest chance of trees surviving would be if they planted in the spring or the fall, but hey.
They went for
Yeah.
July.
They were, yeah, they were.
Yeah.
I kinda had a couple of notes that I jotted down, right, the first paragraph is nothing, second paragraph. The answer is really just one question, right, whose job is it, it's Will's job.
Yeah.
Right? It's the CEO, it's the chief enforcement officer's job. If the plants die, the way it works is that the neighbor notifies the Will's office that the plants have died, and then he does a site visit and he cites them and says you have to, the deal was that these have to be maintained.
Right.
And you gotta replace them.
Okay,
talk
but
about
they're saying
fine.
If they don't, what happens?
Well, my sense is that I would assume there's a process for, if you're cited. And you don't comply, then there's a fine and, escalation of, right, of conflict, right? So the thing about a fine is that, there's no punishment fine, there's fine for non-compliance. And non-compliance is that Will goes out and says these plants have died, you have to replace them. They don't replace them within 30 days or 45 days, then they get fined and then, goes from there. There's a process for this. Right, they don't know what it is, but it exists. Third paragraph is nonsense, fourth paragraph is. That their complaint, the general complaint in the fourth paragraph is, it appears that the Perez's are doing this work as a side. Right, they're doing their full-time job during the day. And then they're coming home and they're doing nights and weekends on their primary house. I don't, other than.
I am so jealous.
I'm jealous too, right? I'm jealous too, but it's not, they don't really ask for anything in that paragraph, they just sort of.
Well, no, he says they all reasonable bills in a timely manner.
What's that?
Sorry, that's, I really need to pass this back on.
Yeah, there's not,
Just
they're not
that-
really asking for anything, they're just kind of complaining about the fact that it's not being run like a construction site. It's being done off hours and at night. And I think
And
what
then
we
it's
can do is,
And then it's endless, that they don't seem to be stopping at any point.
And I think the.
yeah, I guess, I
All
don't
of
know,
this is-
what's the violation of that, right?
We can't do.
Yeah.
They're,
The only thing we can do is that they have to abide by town code, they can't be working before 6 or 7 in the morning, and they can't be working past whatever, 10 o'clock at night, whatever the code is, they have to comply with that, if they're in compliance with that. You may not like it, but it is what it is.
So I don't know, I couldn't spend the
yeah,
brain power focusing on this because there's no issue before us.
No,
about
there's
that.
nothing, really nothing in it, other than they just wanted to know.
Oh, other than the letter says, thank you for taking this seriously, and,
yeah,
I think that's important, I felt heartened by the fact that Dawn felt we were being responsive to her concerns.
so,
I agree.
Right?
so.
Right.
Cynthia, did you respond to her letter? I mean, how are we leaving this? Are
No,
we
we have,
responding?
Dawn met with Will, she met with us.
Oh, great, okay.
Are they settled? Fine. I'm gonna say, if we needed to direct a response, I'm happy to work with Cynthia to direct a response and close it,
Okay.
but it sounds like it's closed.
Okay,
So, if we have agreement that Cynthia's gonna just send a very short something that says, if you're willing to move the garage so that it's not within the 25-foot setback, all this goes away. Just as a reminder. Okay.
The calendar. Just the can of worms. Hey, you don't wanna deal with this,
Right.
don't have an exception. Right?
figure out another place to put it.
Well, but they may say.
They got a lot of property.
I know this is shiny,
Yeah.
there.
Well, I recognize that they don't wanna put it in the middle of their backyard, but. You know, if you can find a way to move it 25 feet away, this all goes away.
And as Bob also, and we've all pointed out, that's exactly just what one of the other sheds is. And then if they're jamming it, we can even make it bigger.
I just,
The
what,
whole world opens up, doesn't it?
so focused that you lose perspective, okay,
Yeah.
so I'm done.
Alright, we have the, are we something to talk about on the survey or?
Just the issue about, are we ever gonna close up this issue? With whether or not. I mean, I thought the most interesting thing was discovering that the code says drawing, not survey.
And I don't know how I missed that, I just don't know how I missed that.
Right.
And so I think at a minimum, we do need to change our requirements from land survey to drawing. Then we need to have some understanding of what we mean by drawing that we can put in there, so when somebody says, here's my drawing, we go, oh, that's not.
No, but it says drawing prepared by a licensed land surveyor.
Right, but you and I exchanged something,
No, I know, but it's not, they're gonna give a drawing, that's not
Right.
gonna satisfy.
But it sounds like a full land survey can be different than a drawing by a land surveyor that's certified. And I guess I should probably share with the rest of you what I said to Jane, for you to think about, but, yeah, we're split, we may be splitting hairs a little bit here. But let me say something, because I think you will appreciate what we're fighting over. We need to be able to tell somebody what it is when they submit something, what we expect it to be. When you call it a survey, a drawing, we need to be clear. And so I'll send something to you that I sent to Jane that says, here's what you should consider. And then we can follow up. It works. But I mean, Jane came up with, it's a drawing, not a survey, and I went, duh,
Right,
duh.
right.
All right, well, let's not prolong this, okay?
Okay.
Just- We'll prolong the survey issue, okay? But just, you know what, I could forward the email that Dennis sent to me with,
Okay,
right?
yeah, I mean,
That has all these considerations about what is a drawing and what's not a drawing and.
yeah,
Wasn't that in the email? No,
Well, what happened is-
I had one, and
You
he
said-
had a different
okay.
thing.
Yeah.
Jane said that I was playing loose and goosey with my attempt to try and say, well, a drawing can be defined this way, and Jane said, you might not be able to get away with that, and I'm like, okay. I got caught. So,
Right. Like, it is a fun term.
well,
It's not, that's
Right.
the problem.
Yeah.
yeah,
Right, what you said, it's not, it's loosely defined.
so do we need to adjourn the meeting?
Yes, go ahead. All right, meeting is adjourned, thank you.
Do you need to vote?
Okay, great.
John?
That's
Suey,
I'm gonna go home, I'm tired, let's go.
you are real